Thanks for listening to the Old Pueblo New Economy podcast with Aaron Eden, Julie Bonner, and Nick Morin. Each episode, we showcase the diverse entrepreneurs and leaders driving growth in the desert we call home. I'm your host, Julie Bonner, for this creative community episode. I'm an artist, designer, and marketing director, and I'm speaking with creative entrepreneurs right here in Arizona. My goal is that you can apply some of these lessons learned into your own best practices. Let's turn up the creativity.
Community Investment Corps, located in Tucson and serving southern Arizona, empowers small business owners with knowledge and access to capital. CIC believes in economic inclusion and supports entrepreneurs and small business owners at all stages with the practical resources and education they need to thrive and turn dreams to reality. CIC is a proud founding sponsor of this podcast.
Nick Duarte is a successful film writer and director who gives wise advice way beyond his years. This creative community episode offers amazing insight into how he grew his film career in Arizona. Learn more about which project was his tipping point and how that turned into so much more opportunity. We discuss challenges in this industry and Tucson, but more importantly, he shares what he's learned. Please enjoy this inspiring conversation with Nick Duarte. All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Julie Bonner from Old Pueblo New Economy, and today I'm really excited. I'm talking to Nick Duarte, who's an Emmy award-winning commercial, film, series, writer, and director, and he's also the co-founder of Crown Chimp Productions. So welcome, Nick.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm excited to do this.
We're going to start off actually talking to Nick. He's a director, he's a writer, he's a busy guy, but want to hear more about how you got your background in the film industry.
Yeah, I'll give you my my sort of nutshell version of the whole thing. So, I got interested in film when I was about 17 years old. I was a senior in high school, and I had a mythology class, and they, gave me the option of doing a report or doing a film assignment with another student, and so I did the film assignment, being lazy, and then absolutely fell in love with it and fell in love with the medium. So from there, I went to Pima Community College, went through their program, bartended, and then just started doing videography work around town, looking for ways to just, kind of get hired to shoot anything, that I could, local pieces, weddings, events, that type of thing. And then in '08, I think it was, 2008. I did a spec commercial, which we can, depending on your audience, we can go into what that means and everything that goes along with that. But I did a spec commercial, sent it out to a whole bunch of different companies, and it got picked up by the folks that were handling Adidas's line of wrestling products for their marketing. They commissioned me out to basically reshoot it with a budget, with an endorsed athlete. And that was really kind of the tipping point for me. That allowed me to, then go off and shoot on and direct on a larger scale with bigger brands and all that type of stuff, and then be able to, put the profits from the commercial work into my own film work, which then, led to creating and generating more opportunities on the film and television side too. And but everything has always been like a boom, boom, boom type of thing.
Yeah, and I'm going to pause you right there too. So, number one, did you get an A on the video you did in school versus a report?
Yeah, I have no idea.
I bet you did. And then number two, then talk about, you mentioned the spec commercial for those that don't have a film background like me. Yeah, what did that mean, shooting that spec?
Yeah, so basically anything, it's something that's done on spec, just not commissioned out. And in the commercial space, one of the best ways to, show your ability as a filmmaker is to do what's called spec commercials, which is essentially a fake commercial that you finance yourself for either an existing or fictional brand. That is essentially proof of concept to say, hey, this is what I could do, left to my own devices. And that basically became a calling card that then got me, more and more work off of that.
That's awesome. And so you basically kind of chose what you wanted to do and show and put it together. And it's like a new thing for your portfolio, basically showing like, I can do this for you, right?
Yeah. Yep. 100%. Up until that point, my portfolio was, small personal projects I had done, and then a lot of, what I would call just kind of traditional videography type work, but nothing that was going to get me noticed necessarily on a larger scale. And it wasn't work that I felt like really showcased, what I could offer. So doing a spec piece was a way to do that.
And then once you got connected with Adidas, then it was like, here we go, commercial, they're paying you. And it was out of town, right? I forget.
Yeah, so that first one,
Yeah.
they actually came into Tucson
Oh, cool.
to do it. And it was still a very low budget, especially in their terms. It was the highest budget thing I had done at that point.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, then that piece went off. It won a national award and it got really good write-ups, and it went viral within its community. So then that just led to doing more work with Adidas, which then led to doing more sports work, which led to some international work. And like I said, it was just kind of the boom, then this type of thing.
Yeah, like growing over time. And then at the end of kind of when you're going through your timeline, opening you up to doing more of kind of like your short films. And do you want to talk about some of those things you've been working on too?
Yeah, so the nice thing with the commercial work is that it gives you a chance to practice your craft. And film making is a very time consuming and very expensive and resource draining medium. So any chance that you have to work on it is something to be fortunate for and grateful for. So it allowed that. It also allows networking within that community, and meeting different casts and crews and people that you want to work with. And then more pragmatically speaking, it also leads to financial opportunity and those resources. So between those three things, it allowed me to be able to start investing in my own short films and documentary projects, which then kind of push out in the exact same way with the commercial stuff to try to get attention and get noticed. But a big part of it too is just doing it for the love of the craft too, and for just genuinely having stories and things that you're trying to process, and this being the format that you do that with.
And what are some of if you could talk about some of your kind of influences or like favorite genres?
Right now I'm really into what would be like elevated genre. So take something very traditionally genre focused, but then finding ways for it to transcend that genre. So something like a ghost story would definitely hit on that type of space. I think there's films like Annihilation that hit in that sort of space where it's
okay.
this, but it's about something more, and you just use the genre devices to to get at something a little bit deeper.
Okay. I didn't even know that term, so I learned something new. Okay, so elevated genre. And I saw one of your short films is a more horror, one of the more recent ones.
I mean, they all kind of have a tinge of that quality.
Yeah.
So the most recent one was Old Man Forever, which is
that's what I was thinking of.
It's horror slash, it has horror elements. Well, I also I think some of the other ones, Where the Sun Goes to Die and Dead Languages, all kind of have, if not directly horror adjacent, or definitely surrealism mixed in there. So that's for sure like a huge element of the work, definitely.
That you like to do. And then I didn't bring up when in this timeline too did you start Crown Chimp Productions, your own company?
So that would be back at Pima. Started that, we all kind of had our little companies, and my first paid job was when I was a student still there, and had to invoice it as something. So just went with that and kind of stuck
with it. And now you've hired people, you work with, like, how have you kind of grown over all this time to find kind of complementary help with what you're doing?
Yeah, well, I think the biggest thing there is, you said the complementary part of it. It's really easy to fall in a trap of bringing aboard people who have your same skill sets and same views. And that initially can seem like a great thing. But ultimately it's not holding up your weaknesses, your, the failings, and it's not bringing you perspectives from a different point of view. So yeah, complementary is, I think, the most important part of working with collaborators. So, I mean, it's come from a mix of things. Tucson is nice that, we do have skilled people behind the camera for sure. It's not a huge talent pool of folks, but there definitely are good quality people here. So, it started off there, and then as I started doing more and more work out of state, and then a little bit broader than that, just finding people that you click with. And because film is so collaborative, you have to really just kind of find the right match, and there's not really a scientific method to that. It's just kind of like, oh, I really enjoyed working with this person, and this person brought a lot to the table, and this person complemented it nicely, and you just kind of, you start to find sort of a group that makes sense, and then through this whole thing, you piece it together too. I haven't found, and I don't think I will, have a DP, a director of photography, that's always that person. But I know, a handful of different DPs I've worked with, and I've enjoyed working with, and they all have their own skill sets, and it becomes more of a, okay, does this feel like a so-and-so project, or does it feel more like this type of a project for so-and-so? And then the same thing with, with actors as well.
I mean, I'm sure sometimes you don't really know how it is until you're actually working on a project together with someone, and then you can draw from that experience, like for the future, which is cool. So you said you have like a network, and you've been here a long time now, and know probably people with different specialties and stuff. What is challenging about also having your business here in Tucson?
Well, it's difficult because, I mean, Tucson is, we've, I think those that are involved in different Tucson groups have heard the term of it being considered like an island of sorts, both geographically, but I think there is also a little bit of that in mentality and perspective. I think that's changed a lot. I definitely think over the last 4 or 5 years, there's become more of a sophistication to Tucson, a little bit more of awareness in the people that I'm working with, and within that network, talking to them. So I think we're trending and growing in the right direction.
That's cool.
But yeah, it's also a very difficult place to work sometimes. The biggest part is that it is still a small market, and as like I said, as much as there are great crew members here, it's still a pretty shallow pool. If there's a big feature that comes through, most of the good quality workers are gone. Only runs a level or two deep. In terms of talent, on-camera talent, cast talent, there's some decent actors, and we got a lot of great faces and a lot of great opportunities for non-actors, but it's also really, really difficult to cast, to a certain degree of quality. And so, a lot of the times we're bringing in people out of LA when we're shooting here for on-camera folks. So yeah, that's challenging.
It's and what is there anything that you think like listeners could help with to help support kind of the creative industry or film industry here? What would be something that people could do?
That's a great question.
It's a hard question, maybe. Yeah.
It is a hard question. I've been doing this for a little over 10 years now. And early on, there's always this conversation of, we got to bring filming back to Tucson. We got to get the tax incentives back. We got to, do this and that. And every year, every other year, somebody kind of comes through and is like, okay, I'm going to bring it all back. And I think just pragmatically speaking, there's pretty high hurdles. And I don't think it's one individual thing. I think it's a lot of things from a lot of individuals. I think starting with finding ways to incentivize students from the university to
Mm.
not leave town,
Yeah.
which is tough to do, and we do a lot of work with the university. We have an internship program with them, and they always ask, should I stay in town or should I go to LA or a major market? And most of the time it's, well, what do you want to do? And then off of that, it's usually like, yeah, you should probably move to a major market,
Mhm.
just because we don't have the infrastructure here yet.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think for people, it's just it comes back to if you love making film and understanding that it is an art form and it deserves your own respect and your own patience, to address the craft practically and in a way that really matters. This is a great place to do that and to practice that. It is outside of a industry bubble. It is a place that I think is a good place for an artist to work, maybe not so much for a career professional.
Mm.
There's a lot more loops or a lot more hoops to jump through in that case. Yeah.
Hoops and loops, all the
Hoops
things.
and loops.
Yeah, all
Yeah. I
those.
don't know if that really answers your question, but
Well,
it's kind
I
of in
think it's a good.
the,
I think it's a good answer. Well, and I asked, it's a pretty hard question. There's not. I
yeah.
agree. There's not like this is what we can all do. But I do think we just have so much. I just love the creative energy here and people like you. And I'm so happy that like you guys live here in Tucson, and even each of us all sometimes have outside work and stuff like that. But it's neat that like Tucson's your home base and you're creating all these really cool films and then bringing like you said, interns from U of A, so you're helping kind of our youth here
Mhm.
get into the business. And I was thinking I have some more questions. What kind of inspires you as far as like what are you listening to or reading or maybe watching that inspires you?
Yeah, I think it's most things are cyclical.
Yeah.
As much as we like to think things are linear, and it's like, oh, went through this phase of my life. Now I'm onto this phase, and now I'm onto this.
Yeah.
I think realistically, it's much more of this type of a movement. So I'd say right now I'm in a phase where I don't really listen or read much that has to do with filmmaking or the Hollywood industry or advertising or marketing. Um, and I think it's just coming off of a phase of like I think I have a strong understanding
Mm-hmm.
of certain things at this point, and now it becomes more of let me synthesize this information and continue to use it and practice. So most of the stuff that I'm listening and reading is more for specific projects.
Mm.
So if I have a project that I'm writing or working on that's in a certain type of uh, it requires a certain degree of education on the subject, then that's kind of where my focus will go. So right now I'm listening to um, Sean Carroll's podcast. He's a theoretical physicist, and he has a lot of kind of heady science and then a lot of philosophy on there, and that's become really informative. But then, going back and you know, reading more Rumi and other pieces that kind of incorporate themselves into my work in terms of things that I think have been influential early on, though.
Mm-hmm.
Tim Ferriss's podcast was
Yeah.
probably one of the big ones.
Yeah, it's good.
uh that was definitely really big. The DGA podcast, where they interview different directors and have directors interview each other,
Mm.
was really I think influential and opened up the door to just seeing how different filmmakers thought. I have on my bookshelf, I have one shelf that's just for, these are like the books that really, really matter and that I'll refer back to.
Cool.
So on that, I have Fellini on Fellini, which is a series of interviews with that director. David Mamet's book on directing, Sidney Lumet's book Making Movies. Then I have some spiritual stuff on there with Thich Nhat Hanh and Richard Rohr. And then there's some more kind of basic business type stuff on there. The Art of Getting Things Done, which I don't really prescribe to so much anymore, but it was the first book that really got me thinking of like, okay, how do I want to structure my life and structure my day, and really taught me a lot about goal setting.
Cool.
So I think that was a big one. Harvard Business Review has a whole bunch of books that I've gone through that just, collects their different articles, managing yourself, that type of thing.
That's cool.
Yeah.
It's a cool mix of kind of like your passions, like the film, but also your learning and your spiritual kind of side. And I think that's really cool that you dedicated a shelf to like have those there, to refer back to. And then with that too, you brought up goal setting and goals. So I want to talk about two things. So one, what has been one of your favorite projects or films you've done? And then I want to hear more about kind of maybe some upcoming things or like your vision for some future projects.
Sure. Yeah. So that's a hard one to do. Because, I always end up having these like love-hate relationships with my projects, where I know there's moments in the making of them where things just click and it's like, okay, this is like, I'm fulfilling something and this feels right.
Yes.
And those moments are these very like kind of intense highs and you feel like you're doing the thing you're supposed to be doing. And then a lot more than that though are moments of like, oh God, this thing's going to fall apart. It's going to be a mess. What am I doing? So it's always this kind of weird thing in the middle of a project. It's leveled out more and more, but it's, it's definitely still there. So it's hard for me to think back on like, I think I liked making that, but I really enjoyed that entire process. I don't know.
Or I guess maybe some were obviously a pain in the butt to work, but the final result maybe, and you were just like, oh yeah, I'm so proud of how that came out.
Yeah, I mean, I think it probably is. It's probably a mix.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't even know if there's really a great correlation to like, oh, this project was really hard to make, but it came out so great. Because sometimes it's like, this project was actually pretty easy to do, and it came out great. And this project was hard, and it came out as a mess.
Right.
And the opposite of that. So it's kind of all over the place. But I worked on a documentary for a really long time called Jay. That was, I think that was probably the biggest growth project for me because it was in the process of, being created for so long that I can see very clear steps.
How long, I guess, was that process?
I think it took me about 5 years
Wow.
to do it. And it was only a 20-minute documentary. And it just took a long time to really wrap my head around how to do it the right way once I got started with it. And we just released that this year, and that's gotten a lot of love. It got a Vimeo staff pick and Short of the Week, and it's gotten picked up by for distribution. And
that's awesome.
So it's done really well. So it's popped back up, and it's led to strangely, some pretty solid commercial opportunities too. So that project is pretty strong. I did a film called Trouble Will Find Her a few years back. That I think of that as especially when I talk to the university. I talk to students because they oftentimes have a very set idea of what a film is the production aspect is supposed to look like.
Okay.
And how much it's supposed to cost, and all of those things. And so this is a film I shot out in Toronto, basically on my per diem. So it was made for only a few $100s. Wow. And it went off. It was nominated for a Webby Award, and it won quite a few other awards. And it was probably one of the cheapest films I've made. And I've had films where a lot more money was spent on it and a lot more time was spent on it, and for whatever reason, just things didn't coalesce as much as they did on that one. What
a cool example though, to show others that it's not always spend this much and you get this much in return or whatever. I'm sure it's like also it's the concept and how you execute it, like all those things, like different factors, I guess.
Yeah, 100% that. And so that's, I don't necessarily remember the process of making it as much, but I do go to that example a lot, like I said, especially when talking to students, because there is such a clear idea of like, oh, okay, a production needs to have X, Y, and Z and all of this stuff. And, and forgetting like there are ways to make, strong films that, are close to your vision and close to what you want, and do it in a way that is economical and in a way that has genuine impact, I think, at least, on people. And it doesn't always require everything that we trick ourselves into thinking.
And I'm sure that's a big piece of like filmmaking and all this stuff, is coming up with a budget and then having to modify that, I'm sure, due to different circumstances, and then figuring out, I guess, prioritizing too, like what do we like have to make sure we have, and what other things can we substitute or take out. Or
I mean, it's with film, you're basically working with people and resources, and so a lot of it is shuffling things around. And okay, if I really want to get this shot, right is probably going to take me another 2 hours to get exactly the way I want. And okay, what's the fallout of that? Well, that means that I'm going to have 2 hours less on this other scene. And so it's like, maybe this one shot will come out great, but this next scene will be mediocre. And so it's constantly just a series of compromises along the way, and constantly like, okay, well, I could put more money into this particular element, but that means that's money I'm not going to get over here on this side for this element. And a lot of it is oddly mitigating risks too, and what are the risks that you can overcome and can't overcome.
Like, for example, like what?
Well, so like the on the casting side of things, do you put a bunch of money into the camera, knowing that there are things you can do to get a stronger image, or do you put that money into your casting process, and what is going to have the biggest impact on the film overall? And it depends on which role you're casting. Are we talking about someone who has one line over here, or are we talking about somebody that's the entire film is based around? And I think that led to a lot of the reason why we're mostly casting out of LA now, just because there's a bigger talent pool, and there's folks with more experience that you can know for a fact that, okay, cool, I spent a fair amount of money and we spent a fair amount of time, but now we can know confidently and feel confident that these 3 people are going to be solid for this part or these parts.
Right, professional and experienced.
Yeah, and we did the homework, and maybe there are other people that could do a good job, but we know that these 3 are going to be able to do it, and that's a big relief. And okay, maybe we didn't put as much money into this other element, but maybe this other element isn't as important to this particular production or this particular story.
That makes sense. It's a lot of shuffling and thinking, and like you said, compromise. What moving forward now, are you looking forward to kind of working on, or maybe there's something you're working on right now, or what's kind of the future for you?
I don't know. I mean, I feel like we're all kind of in a weird
It's a weird
state.
time right now.
Yeah. I honestly don't know. I have a couple scripts that I'm either writing or co-writing, and hopefully we'll be going out and trying to get some financing for those.
Cool.
But I don't know. I mean, yeah.
And for everyone too, so Nick writes and you direct. Do you like them equally, or do you enjoy one thing over the other, or how do you feel about both of those aspects?
At this point, I think they're so intertwined. I enjoy both aspects of the process. I think at this point, I'm probably a better director than I am a writer. But I mean, I don't know. I'm not necessarily objective either. It's hard for me to really, grade myself on that.
Yeah.
I do think there's things to love about both of them, and they're both, fulfilling. And, but usually when I'm thinking of projects, I'm thinking about them, those 2 elements together, even if I'm co-writing with somebody, still writing with the intention, knowing that, script isn't a finished product. Script is just the last part of that phase of the film. And then it's going to go through many more phases. So, I think directing is a little bit more holistic, and that you are bringing, that final piece together.
And how is that like for you, kind of the editing process? done things you've done yourself, but you've also had to work with people that have hired you. And sometimes I know it can be hard editing something you might feel close to. How have you gotten through that these years? Maybe letting something go a little more. How's that been for you?
A lot easier. The more, experience I get, the older I get. The like you hear early on in, I think, creative careers, probably most careers, that's a marathon.
Yeah.
But I think when you're younger, you know, uh, there's this weird time, weird running clock that gets you, and you think like, oh, I have to control everything. I have to do everything. It's really hard to think of the world in terms of a marathon, as opposed to a series of short sprints, because that's kind of how you've always lived your life up until that point. At this point, though, it becomes more of okay, yeah, that's the end of this project. I'm not defined by this project as a human being. I can, let go. I think it's become a lot easier, especially with like client work and commercial work. Knowing that ultimately, like, hey, it's not, I'll be fine at the end of this. It's not my money that's being put up for this thing. So, become a lot better at listening to other people's ideas and letting those things go. And I think especially in the editing room, working with other editors and commercial editors, you are working with people who are really good at their specialty and their craft. And it'd be kind of foolish to not take their input and their advice. On my film work, a lot of that I'm editing, or I'm, much more involved in the post process. But you still have to find a way to get objectivity and distance from it. So, I usually will lean heavily on the iterative process and, create a lot of different versions and, share them with a lot of different people, get feedback, incorporate the notes that feel right, do the next cut, share, rinse, repeat type of thing. You're always trying to find a way to not, you want to be close to it because it's your work and it's, some sort of expression, but it's very easy to get too close to it, to the point that it doesn't really translate to other humans.
Yeah. I think also, I think part of it too is probably when you're doing commercial work. I've learned also sometimes it's with experience, you realize when you should show something to a client versus keep working on it and perfecting it and making it just so much more perfect. But then you're not letting them kind of see the direction you're going. And sometimes you go down that wrong path. And I think that takes experience sometimes.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it too is knowing your client and knowing that not all clients are equal in the terms of the way they interact with the work that they're, helping to shepherd or they are shepherding.
Yeah.
And so it's trying to find ways to read them early on. And if you have a client that says, oh, I like to be involved at every step of the process, trying to figure out like, is that really true or not?
Yeah.
And if it's a client that says, send me stuff when it's done, that's my preferred version. And then trying to figure out like, is that true or isn't it true? Knowing people are kind of funny and fickle and those things change. But yeah, like knowing when to like, okay, here's a big shift. Let me get approval on this. Or, what I found over the last few years, providing options has really helped, especially in edits where we can say, okay, here's this cut with this track, and this track. What are you preferring? Here's one where we've leaned heavily on this performance over this one. And, just so it's less, and I think it helps them too. I know it helps me as a director if, say somebody who's working wardrobe can present to me 3 different options, as opposed to saying, oh, here's the one option you have. And then I'm looking, I'm like, I don't know if this is, quite it or not.
You're also,
options helps.
Yeah, you're empowering them to feel like they're making a choice. And I do the same with logos though, where one might think it's what they want. And then I'll do one that after listening to them, I think it's the one, and then maybe one more. And you hope that they're going with, but it's their choice ultimately if they're the client. But yeah, it's almost like use cases, like showing it for real can really help them like envision what's happening.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. That's probably something I wish I would have done like many years ago.
It's hard to know when you're younger though. I think that's why something like this is good for some younger up and comers to hear. is some of these things that we've learned maybe the hard way. What would be like a dream project, dream movie, if you could really do whatever you wanted right now? What would that look like?
I don't know. I mean, honestly, I'm kind of in a place where like I kind of want to just keep doing what I'm doing,
That's
but
good.
with more, more resources, but not even that. Just kind of wanting to continue to grow in the craft. I've been so big goal oriented for most of my life that now it's becoming a little bit more about just the day-to-day work of it and just trying to enjoy it more.
Oh, that's
been
cool.
Kind of my bigger thing recently. And maybe that has been because I've let so many productions, be colored by moments of stress and is this thing going to work or come together, and realizing that doesn't make it any better. It just makes me enjoy it less. It doesn't, make things go quicker. It doesn't, solve all the problems that come. It just, just shades it a little bit differently. So yeah, I've kind of stopped thinking about like the big dream of, things. I have different projects that I want to do. To tell you about them would be rambling through nonsense at this point. But I have shows and films, that I'm working towards. But right now, I think, most of my mental space is just, okay, how can I make what's in front of me better?
It's cool. It sounds like you're in the moment. You're being in the moment. You're being present.
Working towards it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's good. Well, hey, with the family too, it's one day at a time. And in case anyone heard, that's his daughter in the background there. She's super adorable. And I have kids. I'm in my son's room right now, basically. Took this over just so it could be a little quieter in the house. But it's really good. Thanks for taking the time today. And I wanted to have you tell me how listeners could see some of your work online, or how they could connect with you.
Yeah. Social media wise, at Mr. Nick Duarte. On Instagram is really the only one that I use with any sort of regularity.
Okay.
So you can find me there. NickolasDuarte.com is my portfolio site. And then CrownChimp.com is my company's sites. Just throw out there, we are the most awarded production company in Arizona.
That's
so
awesome.
Anybody that's interested in making stuff or, looking for freelance opportunities, anything like that, find us on CrownChimp.com and we'll start a conversation.
Sounds good. And you're easy to talk to. So thanks for spending the time today, taking the time. It's good to see you. And thanks for being a part of our pretty new podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was fun.
You're welcome. Thank you for listening today. This was a thoughtful conversation with Nick Duarte. The key lessons that stand out include: number 1, it's a process. In this episode, we learned how Nick had his first film assignment when he was 17 and how it morphed into a film career. In the beginning, he was shooting small personal projects with traditional videography. But everything changed in 2008 when he created a spec commercial that was picked up by Adidas Wrestling, who even used an endorsed athlete. This was his tipping point. The commercial went viral and earned a national award. This led to more commercial work, which allowed Nick to start investing in his own short films and documentaries. Number 2, managing client expectations. Through experience, you learn how to best communicate with your client and when to send more options to them. Knowing your client and the way they interact with the work is important. Find ways to read them early on. Nick states, with more experience, it becomes a lot easier with client and commercial work, knowing that I'll be fine at the end of this. You become a lot better at listening to other people's ideas and letting some things go. Number 3, growing your team. To quote Nick, it can be easy to fall into a trap of bringing in people who have the same skill sets and views onto your team, and that can initially seem like a great thing. But ultimately, it's not balancing your weaknesses and not bringing you perspectives from a different point of view. Finding complementary talent is the most important part of working with collaborators. Over time and through experience, you start finding a group that makes sense. We appreciate you listening to the Old Pueblo New Economy podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please check out all of our episodes and series at www.oldpuebloneweconomy.com. While you're there, please make sure to sign up for our newsletter and receive upcoming episodes as they air. Thank you for listening and stay tuned for next week's episode.